This is what dying from every deadly ancient disease feels like. Leptospirosis, Weil's disease. Imagine you're a farmer in rural India, sometime in the early 1900s. The rainy season just ended, and weeks of non-stop downpour have turned your fields into one giant puddle. You've been wading through the water for days, trying to save your crops. Your feet are cracked, and you're covered in little scrapes from working in the fields. You don't think too much of it though, because you've been doing this for years. About a week later, you wake up feeling like you've been hit by a cart. You have a high fever, every muscle in your body aches, and your head is pounding. You figure it's the flu, make some soup, and decide to sleep it off. Unfortunately, this isn't the flu. It's something much worse. The floodwater you've been wading through all week contains rat urine, carrying the thin, spiral-shaped bacteria called Leptospira. Rats serve as reservoir hosts for the bacteria, which means they can carry it in their kidneys for their entire lives and spread it every time they pee. And that's exactly what happened on your farm. Now, remember those cuts on your feet? That's how the bacteria slipped right through and entered your bloodstream. For the first week after the fever sets in, your body puts up a pretty good fight. The fever starts to ease up and you feel a little better, so you think the worst is over. You're wrong. The brief recovery is just the disease playing a trick on you. While your immune system is busy celebrating, the bacteria has already spread to your organs and set up camp. A few days after you start feeling better, a second wave hits. And this time, it's much worse. Your skin and the whites of your eyes start turning yellow. That's your liver starting to fail, which means it can no longer process your body's waste the way it's supposed to. One of those waste products is a yellow pigment called bilirubin. Normally, the liver clears this out, but since it can't keep up anymore, the bilirubin backs up into your bloodstream and slowly stains everything it touches yellow. At the same time, your kidneys are shutting down. They stop filtering your blood properly, and the waste products that should have been released start piling up inside you instead. You stop producing urine, and the fluid that should have gone down the drain starts collecting in your legs and feet, making them swell. It's only a matter of time before the bacteria makes its way to your lungs. Once there, it attacks the tiny blood vessels inside the lung tissue until those vessels start to leak. Blood seeps into the air sacs that are supposed to be holding oxygen, and every breath gets a little harder than the last. You start coughing, then you start gasping, and eventually you'll die by drowning in your own blood. Doctors call that pulmonary hemorrhage. By the time your lungs give out, your liver has already failed, and your kidneys have shut down. When all three of those disasters happen at the same time, doctors have another name for it. They call it Weil's disease. For thousands of years, farmers, sewer workers, and flood survivors across China, Japan, and Europe died exactly the way you just did, and nobody had any idea why. It wasn't until 1886 that a German doctor named Adolf Weil finally put it all together. The disease got named after him. Antibiotics work for the treatment, but only if doctors catch it during that first week window. Sweating sickness. Imagine you're a merchant in London in the summer of 1528, haggling over the price of a shipment that just came in from the docks. The trader you're dealing with is in a hurry. He's wiping sweat off his face every few seconds and coughing between sentences. You finally agree on a price, shake his hand, and watch him head off to his next stop. You go home and forget the whole thing happened. Then one morning, not long after, you wake up feeling strange, like your body is trying to warn you about something you can't quite place. Within the hour, violent chills rip through you, and you're shaking so hard you can barely hold the cup steady. Your neck locks up first, then your shoulders, then your legs, until every muscle in your body feels like it's been wrung out and left raw. Your head is pounding so hard you can barely keep your eyes open. You crawl back into bed and pile on every blanket you own because you feel like you're freezing from the inside out. The chills last an hour, maybe 3. Then without warning, they vanish, and in their place comes an unbearable, suffocating heat. Your body erupts into a drenching sweat that soaks straight through the sheets, so heavy and foul-smelling that your wife, who's been sitting right beside your bed, has to step outside for air. Your heart starts slamming against your ribs. Confusion sets in. You don't know where you are anymore. You don't know what time it is, and the room won't stop spinning. Then, an overwhelming urge to sleep crashes over you, and every part of your body starts begging for you to close your eyes. You call your doctor, hoping he'll have answers, and if you're lucky, the right medication to heal you. But he has nothing. No idea what caused your condition or how to fix it. He just gives you one order. Do not fall asleep. He says everyone in your condition who does doesn't wake up. So your wife and the neighbors who've heard about your sickness start taking shifts to keep you awake by any means necessary. Staying awake through the first 24 hours means you'll most likely pull through. That's the strange mercy of this disease. It either kills you quickly or lets you recover just as fast. Unfortunately, you don't make it to the 24-hour mark. You drift off to sleep, and 8 hours after that first chill, your doctor pronounces you dead. It doesn't sound like it, but you actually got off easy compared to some cases. Some people never get the chills or the sweat or any warning at all. One moment they're standing there, and the next moment, they're gone. A French ambassador who witnessed the 1528 outbreak wrote back to his government that this disease was, quote, the easiest in the world to die of. He wasn't exaggerating. There's an account of two priests standing in the street talking, and both of them dropping dead before the conversation ended. In the first outbreak alone, back in 1485, roughly 15,000 people died in London in about 6 weeks. Sweating sickness swept through England 5 times between 1485 and 1551 and killed tens of thousands of people. Then one day, it just stopped showing up. Over the years, scientists have blamed everything from hantavirus to anthrax and relapsing fever. But every theory leaves something unexplained. So even now, with all our labs and all our research, we know just about as much as your doctor did back in 1528, which is to say, nothing at all. Ergotism. Imagine you're a peasant farmer in France in the year 994. You're arguing with a trader over a sack of grain he swears is fine, even though half of it is spotted with strange dark patches. Eventually, you decide you don't have time for his nonsense, but hungry mouths are waiting for you at home. So when he knocks a little off the price, you take it anyway. Your wife mills it down and bakes it into bread, and your family eats it the way you always do. The next day, your fingers and toes start to tingle. Then it feels like your hands and feet are being held too close to a fire that isn't actually there. Within days, the burning gets so unbearable that you find yourself standing at the edge of a river, ready to jump in just to make it stop. Your neighbor tried exactly that last week. It didn't put out his fire, it just drowned him. Remembering that, you turn around and go back home to bed instead. While you're burning and shaking on your sickbed, your family does the only thing they can. Since you're too poor to call in a doctor, they keep feeding you bread, certain that keeping your strength up will help you fight off whatever this is. None of you have any idea that the bread is the reason you're sick in the first place. Buried in the grain you bought was a fungus called Claviceps purpurea, a natural parasite that's been infecting crops since long before anyone was around to name it. It spreads by releasing tiny particles called spores, basically the fungal version of seeds, which drift off on the wind until they land on grain while it's still flowering. From there, the fungus quietly takes over the plant from the inside, swapping healthy seeds for its own small dark growths. Milling doesn't stop it. Baking doesn't stop it either. It survives the whole journey completely intact. And now it's exactly where it wanted to be all along, which is inside you. And it isn't a single poison. The fungus produces a whole cocktail of chemicals called ergot alkaloids, and you've been swallowing a dose of them with every meal. One of those alkaloids is called ergotamine, and it goes straight for your blood vessels, squeezing them so tight that blood can't reach the parts of your body furthest from your heart. Your fingers and toes take the hit first, and without blood flow, the tissue starts dying, a condition doctors call gangrene. They turn black, and slowly, painfully, your limbs may fall off while you're still alive to feel it happening. But your grain happened to carry a different mix, heavier on alkaloids that are chemically close cousins of LSD. Instead of your blood vessels, they go after your brain, messing with the same chemical signals as serotonin. By day 4 or 5, you start seeing things that aren't there, and minutes stretch into what feels like hours. By the end of the week, the seizures begin. Violent, full-body convulsions that keep returning every few days, often paired with sudden bursts of energy and agitation that make the people around you wonder if something has taken over your body. Meanwhile, those same alkaloids are also squeezing the blood vessels feeding your heart, and between that and being thrown into convulsions over and over, your heart finally gives out. The strain that killed you also killed somewhere between 20,000 and 40,000 people in a single outbreak in France. And at least 83 separate outbreaks have been documented throughout history. There was no cure then, and there still isn't one now. Inhalation Anthrax. Imagine you're a wool sorter in 19th century England, working in a cramped factory room filled with imported animal hides and raw wool. The air is thick with dust from the fibers, and every breath you take pulls a little more of that dust into your lungs. Every job has its hazards, but hey, at least you're not a chimney sweep who has to climb into chimneys and breathe in soot all day. One morning you wake up with a sore throat that feels like you swallowed a handful of gravel. You're burning up, and your whole body aches. You figure it's just a cold, so you shrug it off and get dressed for work like always. After all, your colleagues catch colds like this all the time. Unfortunately for you, this isn't one of those times. Buried in the last batch of wool you sorted were dormant spores of a bacteria called Bacillus anthracis, and you've been breathing them in for days without knowing it. The moment they reached your lungs, they got activated. Bacillus anthracis has a body count that goes back centuries. Some historians believe it was behind 2 of the 10 plagues in the book of Exodus. Even Homer, the ancient Greek poet known for writing the Iliad, described something that sounds a lot like it as far back as 700 BC. By the time it reached your lungs in that wool dust, it had already been killing people for well over 2,000 years. For the first 2 or 3 days after you start seeing symptoms, your body actually seems to be winning the fight. The fever eases slightly. You feel almost normal, so you think you're getting better. Spoiler alert, you're not. While you were going about business as usual, the spores had already germinated inside your lungs and started pumping out 2 separate toxins. One of them walks straight up to the immune cells sent to destroy it and switches them off, like cutting the power to a security camera. The other floods the area around the lymph nodes in your chest with a fluid. Those lymph nodes are supposed to work like checkpoints, catching anything dangerous before it spreads further. With the checkpoint swamped and disabled, the infection is free to keep going wherever it wants. By the 4th day, it all comes back at once, and this time it's nothing like before. The fever spikes hard. The lymph nodes in your chest swell so much that they start pressing against your windpipe, and every breath feels like sucking air through a straw somebody keeps pinching shut. Your skin takes on a bluish tint because your blood isn't carrying enough oxygen anymore. While all this is happening, the infection is also creeping into your brain. Soon, you start experiencing confusion. A splitting headache follows, and before long, you lose consciousness altogether. Within hours, your body slips into shock. Your blood pressure crashes, and one by one, the organs that depend on a steady blood supply begin shutting down. Once you reach this stage, you've got about 24 hours left, maybe 36 if you're lucky. The truth is, you never really had a chance. The moment those anthrax spores reached your lungs, the outcome was already heavily stacked against you. Historically, inhalation anthrax killed about 85 to 90% of the people who caught it. Even today, with modern antibiotics and intensive care, it still kills nearly half of all cases. Plague of Athens. Imagine you're a soldier stationed at Piraeus, the port that feeds Athens, in the summer of 430 BC. Athens is at war with Sparta, and Pericles has ordered everyone from the countryside behind the city walls, betting they can survive a siege while the navy keeps supplies flowing. The city is so overcrowded it takes twice as long just to get home. That night, when you finally make it home, you collapse onto your sleeping mat, exhausted. The next morning, you wake up with a sudden violent fever. Your eyes turn red and swollen and won't stop watering. Your throat and tongue swell until your breath turns foul enough that anyone standing near you steps back. Then the sneezing starts, followed by a dry, scratchy cough and an urge to vomit so forceful your whole body convulses, even though there's nothing in your stomach to throw up. Within a day or two, the stomach cramps arrive. Diarrhea and vomiting hit at the same time and drain you until you're too weak to stand without holding on to something. While you're busy going in and out of the bathroom, your skin breaks out in a rash of small ulcers that spread across your entire body. You'd think that's the worst of it, but it's not. By day 4, the heat arrives, and it makes everything before it feels small. You develop a fever that burns so deep, it feels like your skeleton is on fire, and your skin is just along for the ride. Now, you can't sleep, and you can't stay still, so you just continue tossing and turning in agony. By day 7, the burning has been going on for 3 days straight, and your body is completely drained from the vomiting and diarrhea. That's when the organ damage that's been building up the entire time finally catches up with you. You lose consciousness, and you don't come back from it. In the years after your death, the disease goes on to kill somewhere between 75,000 and 100,000 more people in Athens, roughly a quarter to a third of the entire city. Among them is Pericles himself, The man whose own military strategy packed everyone inside those walls in the first place. Nothing the physicians tried saved you, or them. The ones who stayed to treat the sick mostly just caught it and joined the body count, which did wonders for morale. Whatever killed you didn't stop until enough of the city had either died or somehow survived and built up immunity to it. To this day, nobody has been able to fully agree on what this disease actually was. Most of what we know comes from an Athenian historian named Thucydides. He caught it himself, survived, and wrote down every symptom in careful detail, specifically so future generations could recognize it if it ever came back. Researchers have proposed typhoid fever, Ebola, smallpox, and several other candidates over the centuries. DNA testing on bodies from a mass grave discovered in Athens in 1994 pointed toward typhoid, but the full symptom profile still doesn't fit any disease we know today. And because nobody can agree on what it was, nobody has ever been able to figure out how to treat it either. Whatever killed you in 430 BC would kill you just as easily today. Pneumonic Plague. Imagine you're at a market stall in a crowded medieval city in the winter of 1347, arguing with a trader over the last loaf of bread on his table. He's practically shouting his price at you, and after every few words he doubles over with a cough that sprays tiny drops of blood across your sleeve. You finally give up, pay what he's asking, and walk away with the bread. You have no idea you're taking something else home too. 3 days later, you wake up with a fever and a pounding headache. Every muscle in your body aches, and your chest feels so tight, it's like someone stacked bricks on top of it while you slept. You assume you've picked up a bad winter cold, so you stay in bed, drink some water, and wait for it to pass. It doesn't. The next day, the cough starts. At first, it's dry and scratchy, the kind that refuses to clear no matter how many times you try. Then, within hours, everything changes. Every cough brings up bright red blood. Turns out that argument over bread ended up costing you a lot more than a few extra coins. The man you argued with was infected with Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium behind the bubonic plague. This version, though, doesn't need fleas to spread it. It travels through the air in tiny droplets, and every time that trader coughed, he was filling the space around him with bacteria. All you had to do was breathe. Once the bacteria reached your lungs, your immune system tried to stop them. Unfortunately, Yersinia pestis already had a plan for that. It injects proteins in your immune cells to stop them from raising the alarm, giving the bacteria a day or two to multiply almost undisturbed. By the time your body realizes something is wrong, they've already taken over. Your immune system finally fights back, but it overdoes it. It floods your lungs with immune cells and inflammatory fluids so aggressively that it ends up destroying your lung tissue along with the bacteria. The tiny air sacs that should be filling with oxygen start filling with fluid instead. Every breath feels like you're trying to inhale through a soaking wet blanket. The coughing gets worse. So does the blood. Before long, your blood isn't carrying enough oxygen to keep the rest of your body running. Your lips turn blue. Your kidneys start shutting down, and your heart struggles to keep a steady rhythm. At some point, you stop responding to the people around you. A little later, your breathing stops too, and that's how you die. From the moment you got infected, you never really stood a chance. Without treatment, pneumonic plague kills close to 100% of the people it infects. And you didn't even have the warning signs people back then knew to look for. It was just a cough, followed by a very fast death. The only thing that could have saved you was antibiotics given within the first 24 hours of your very first symptom. But by the time anyone realized what was happening to you, that window had already closed. Cocolistli. Imagine you're a farmer working the highlands of Mexico in 1545. Halfway through your morning, a headache hits hard enough to stop you in your tracks. Within hours, you're burning with fever. By evening, blood starts dripping from your nose for no obvious reason. Your family fetches the local healer, but after looking you over, he's just as confused as everyone else. Whatever you've caught, nobody around you has ever seen anything like it. By the next day, your mouth is so dry that no amount of water helps. Deep cramps twist through your stomach, and then the bleeding gets worse. Blood starts running from your ears, then your eyes. It feels like your body has decided every opening is now an exit wound, and nobody has the slightest idea how to stop it. While all of that is happening, your skin starts turning yellow, which means your liver is failing. Your tongue also darkens until it turns black, and your urine comes out looking like tar. By day 3, the convulsions arrive. Violent, full-body seizures that throw you off the ground. And in between them come hallucinations so vivid that you genuinely can't tell what's real and what isn't anymore. By day 4, there's simply nothing left of you to keep going. The bleeding hasn't stopped, and neither have the seizures. Your organs have been failing since the first day, quietly shutting down one after another. Somewhere between the convulsions and the hallucinations, you lose consciousness. And this time, you never wake up. 4 days ago, you had a headache. Now, you're dead. Just like thousands of other people across Mexico who all seem to have fallen sick at exactly the same time. For centuries, nobody knew what had actually caused the pandemic. Then in 2018, scientists extracted DNA from the teeth of people buried in mass graves linked to the outbreak. They found evidence of an unusually aggressive strain of Salmonella, the same family of bacteria responsible for typhoid fever. The evidence suggests that it may have played a major role in the disaster. The problem is that ordinary typhoid doesn't usually look anything like this. Massive bleeding from multiple parts of the body, liver failure, seizures, and death in just a few days aren't typical symptoms, which is why many researchers think Salmonella wasn't acting alone. Whatever swept through Mexico in 1545 was unlike anything the people living through it had ever seen before. Not long after you died, the disease went on to kill somewhere between 5 and 15 million people in the 3 years that followed. That's up to 80% of the entire indigenous population of Mexico, gone in 3 years. A second outbreak came in 1576 and killed another 2 to 2.5 million, roughly half of whoever had managed to survive the first one. The two waves combined stand as one of the worst demographic catastrophes in recorded human history, surpassing even the Black Death in terms of the percentage of a population wiped out in a single epidemic. The word Cocolisli comes from Nahuatl, the language of the people who lived through it, and simply means pestilence. Nearly 5 centuries later, scientists are still arguing over exactly what caused it and why it was so devastating. So it's safe to say there's no cure in sight. Epidemic typhus. Imagine you're a soldier in Napoleon's army in the winter of 1812, retreating from Moscow. You've been wearing the same clothes for weeks and sleeping pressed against other men in freezing camps just to stay warm. One morning, you pull back your shirt to scratch the itch that's been bothering you for days, and you notice a small bite mark on your chest that wasn't there yesterday. You don't know it yet, but it's the lice living in your unwashed clothes that did the damage. Lice bites don't hurt, which is exactly why you didn't notice. But about 10 days ago, somewhere in that freezing camp, a louse carrying a bacterium called Rickettsia prowazekii bit you. And as it fed, it defecated on your skin. When you scratch the bite, you unknowingly rub that infected feces straight into the wound. And that's how the bacteria enter your bloodstream. Around a week or two after that bite, the fever hits you out of nowhere. Along with it comes muscle pain and a severe headache drilling behind your eyes. A few days later, a rash made of small pink spots starts spreading across your skin. But between the freezing weather and the dozen other things quietly trying to kill you on this retreat, a rash barely registers. Inside your body, Rickettsia prowazekii has invaded the cells lining your blood vessels, slowly weakening them until they start leaking fluid into the surrounding tissue. Every leak makes it harder for your circulatory system to keep enough blood moving around your body. Your blood pressure eventually falls so low that simply standing up feels like your brain has been unplugged. Then your organs begin running out of the blood they need to stay alive. Your kidneys slow down, and your liver follows. The same damage reaches the blood vessels in your brain, and before long, you can't remember where you are or even what day it is. From there, the confusion gets so bad you stop making sense even to yourself. You start mumbling things that don't add up, and you can't recognize people you've known your whole life. That rash you noticed on your chest keeps changing too. The small pink spots darken and turn purple and black as the blood vessels underneath them start dying. Meanwhile, the same bacteria destroying your blood vessels everywhere else has also been attacking the vessels feeding your heart muscle. Your heart, already under strain from weeks of disease, starts losing its rhythm. The beats become irregular, then weaker, then further apart. At some point in the 3rd week, your heart stops altogether, and that's how you die in a freezing army camp, thousands of miles from home. If you'd been born a couple of centuries later, you'd have had a fighting chance. Today, a course of antibiotics clears typhus out, and if you catch it early, you'd almost certainly walk away fine. But in 1812, nobody knew what it was, that lice carried it, or how to stop it. Untreated, it kills between 10 and 40% of the people it infects, sometimes even higher, depending on the conditions they are living in. In Napoleon's retreating army alone, it killed so many soldiers that historians have argued it did more damage to his forces than the Russian military ever managed to. Visceral leishmaniasis. Imagine you're sitting outside your home in rural India sometime in the early 1800s, watching the sun go down. Something lands on your ankle and bites you, but it's so tiny and painless you barely notice it. By the time you head inside for the night, you've already forgotten it happened. That was a sandfly, and it left a parasite called leishmania behind in your skin. Sandflies are the only way this parasite spreads. They bite someone who's already infected, pick up the parasite, then pass it to the next person they feed on. This time, that person was you. The parasite's first move is surprisingly clever. Instead of running from your immune system, it hides inside it. Macrophages, the cell whose entire job is to swallow and destroy invaders, happily engulf the parasite. Unfortunately, that's exactly what it wanted. It is essentially broken into your house by disguising itself as the furniture. From there, it quietly multiplies inside those immune cells and spreads to your spleen, liver, and bone marrow. You don't feel any of it. For the next few months, life carries on as normal while the parasite slowly takes over the organs keeping you alive. Then, the fever starts. It comes and goes in waves, sometimes lingering for weeks at a time. Your appetite disappears, and your skin gradually turns pale with a grayish tint. You assume the heat has finally caught up with you, so you stay indoors more often, drink extra water, and wait for it to pass. It doesn't. A month or two later, your stomach begins swelling. That's your spleen growing larger as it fills with infected immune cells, trying and failing to contain the parasite. Your liver starts enlarging too, leaving your abdomen noticeably swollen. Meanwhile, your bone marrow is running out of room to do its job. You turn severely anemic and exhausted, and the smallest bumps leave a bruise because your blood can no longer clot the way it should. By the third or fourth month, your immune system tips into a confused, overactive state and starts damaging your own blood vessels from the inside. Tiny clots form throughout your bloodstream where they don't belong, and at the same time, you start bleeding internally. Your immune system gets so worn down, it can't handle the small stuff anymore. A cough you'd normally shake off in a few days turns into pneumonia. Your chest tightens. Breathing gets harder by the hour, and no matter how much air you pull in, it never feels like enough. Your lungs, already pushed past their limit, finally give out. You take one last shallow breath, and then nothing. Around 750,000 people died exactly the way you just did, in a single outbreak that tore through Jessore, in what's now Bangladesh. It started in 1824 and lasted 3 years. Nobody there had a name for what was killing them. They just called it fever disease. Luckily today, visceral leishmaniasis is treatable. A drug called liposomal amphotericin B, used in South Asia where the disease is most common, achieves cure rates above 95% when caught early enough. But in rural India in the early 1800s, none of that existed. There was no treatment, no name for what was happening to you, and no way to stop it.